almost 2 weeks since those attacks. People are wondering, why haven't we thumped back? Why aren't there some B-52s dropping bombs on somebody somewhere?
Well, you know, John, that's what I was saying earlier, that this is a network. It's not a set of targets as in previous wars. And so you have to very carefully decide what connections, like financial connections and communications and those kinds of things, to sever among those nodes. Don't be deceived, however. The Pentagon has been very tight-lipped. You know, 2 weeks after the invasion of Kuwait, we knew a lot of what was going on in terms of military movements. We don't know squat right now, except some foreign press reports that some ground troops have been reported in Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. Some aircraft have landed. I'm just guessing, but I'm pretty sure that there's a lot more going on that we don't see.
All right. James Blackwell, those aren't reassuring words to a lot of Americans tonight. If the possibility of a nuclear terrorist attack is still out there, I mean, what are some people supposed to go to bed thinking tonight?
Well, John, let me assure you that they can rest easy. Given the terrorist attacks that happened September 11th and the results, the actions taken by the government since then, I think our security is obviously a lot more firm than it was at that time. But there are still the chances that other terrorist attacks could occur. Now, you know, what's striking to me is the response of the military. There's no doctrine for dealing with this kind of an operation, this war on terrorism, but they're going about it the same way that they went after the problem that was tossed to them in Panama when no one told them how to take down a country. They were just told to do it. Or in Iraq when we asked the military to give a country back to its rightful government. And even in Kosovo when a very challenging problem thrown at the military was solved for the first time in history by air power alone. So I think that from the military side, as we heard John Ashcroft say, I think the U.S. military is going to give America great confidence that they're going to win this war on terrorism.
But James Blackwell, is time on our side at this point? I mean, with the attacks having come on September 11th, the longer the U.S. military waits, the better information they come up with?
I think time is on our side, but we need to think about this war very differently than even any of the previous wars we've seen in the last decade and a half. I like the characterization of the enemy not as a single person, Osama bin Laden or Noriega or Saddam Hussein. In this case, it's a network. And really, people ought to think about the Internet. And how do you bring down the Internet? You know, you find a few key nodes. You disrupt the links between those nodes. You don't necessarily have to take out just one central figure in order to take down a network. But I think we know how to do that. And the more time we can spend causing those nodes to show themselves through limited attacks, through shows of force and other means, the more we're going to get to know about where the really critical ones are and bring that network down.
Airstrikes in Afghanistan have been going on for more than 3 weeks now, but the Taliban is still holding on. And with the holy month of Ramadan right around the corner, what's going to happen next? Joining us now, retired Army Major James Blackwell. James, thanks for being with us this morning.
Glad to be here.
I don't know if you've seen the footage that Steve Harrigan sent back from Afghanistan, but there was apparently a large explosion north of Kabul, near the front lines where Steve is. It sent what he described as a mushroom cloud, 1,000 feet into the air at least. Is that a new kind of weapon, or does it just suggest that the U.S. is using some really big bombs in that area?
It's probably not a new kind of weapon. All kinds of guesses might apply, and until the Pentagon tells, we don't really know. But you would want to speculate about perhaps they hit a very large fuel supply or a very large ammunition storage facility. Other guesses might be that they're beginning to use the 5,000-pound bunker-busting bombs, that perhaps they had a target they thought that would be serviced by that kind of munition. Those kinds of things would explain the very large explosion that Steve Harrigan
So the cloud
saw.
came as much from what was hit, perhaps,
yes,
as much as from the weapon used.
My guess is that's probably more likely. the source of the cloud, yes.
And obviously, a lot of people hear mushroom cloud and they think nuclear. That's not what we're talking about here.
I don't think so. That's just not in the cards for this war. And a mushroom-shaped cloud can form from a large explosion when the atmospheric conditions are just right. So, in fact, we used to use, in the old days when we practiced worrying about a nuclear battlefield, we used to use explosive devices that would simulate those mushroom clouds. So they're not unique to nuclear weapons. No, not at all.
Let's talk about the pace of this thing. Secretary Rumsfeld was counseling patience yesterday, along with Richard Myers, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Any indication in your mind that this thing is bogging down?
No, not at all. You have the statement recently from Central Command Commander-in-Chief General Tommy Franks. We're not at a stalemate. It's proceeding at a deliberate pace. I've said before that you're going to see an ebb and flow in the application of U.S. military force as the network collapses, the Taliban and the al-Qaeda network collapses on itself, and as the U.S. brings the forces around the outside to cause that collapse. And I think what's next is not stalemate. Remember, since the end of the Vietnam War, the U.S. military applies this decisive force. They call it overwhelming force. I suspect that what's being done right now is laying the groundwork for a more decisive campaign to come when the conditions are right. And that may be 4 weeks from now. It may be 2 days from now. It may be 4 months from now. When all the intelligence and the targeting and the ground forces are just right, I expect we'll see a much more visible and much more impressive campaign.
So a decisive force, meaning ground troops, probably?
I think in some role. What's interesting is that there's no doctrine for the kind of war on terror that's being conducted right now in Afghanistan. There's no precedent. There's no experience. The commanders-in-chief are going to be very creative in how they design this particular campaign. It's not simple. It's very sophisticated, and they have to draw on new theories of war, if you will, to put it together. And so this is not going to be predictable by any of us military analysts. I think we're going to have to wait and watch it unfold.
All indications are that the Taliban is sending reinforcements to the front lines north of Kabul to keep the Northern Alliance from streaming down. In a way, that could be good news, because if they send all of those imported Arab fighters, all of these Osama bin Laden loyalists, they send them all pouring in there. If we can take them out, so much the better.
That's one way to interpret it, yes. I do think it's a positive sign in this sense. What the air campaign, I think, has been designed to do up to now is to force the Taliban and al-Qaeda to do something, to get them out of their bunkers, out of their holes, not just to sit there and squat down next to the mosques and inside the urban areas and wait out the fight. They have been made to feel like they've got to do something. They've got to move major forces. They've got to keep their leadership moving around. That's what we want them to do, so that we can see what they're doing and then target them and strike them later.
Retired Army Major James Blackwell, thanks very much.
Pleasure to be here, John.
That shape our lives, events as they happen. The world turns to the Fox News Channel. The information you need, the coverage you expect. We are the network America and the world trusts for fair and balanced news.